Hi, it's Dr. Asatar Bear from Meditation 2.0, where inner peace meets modern life. And this class is meditation for reducing stress and easing anxiety. So what I'll do in the class is I'll talk a little bit about what is stress, um, physiologically, mentally, emotionally, um, and then I'll give you some techniques um, to help you deal with stress. And then we'll talk about what is anxiety. Um, and I'll give you some techniques. We'll try them out. And then I'll take questions. And so we'll do a couple of meditation exercises, as we go along, rather than doing, one long one. All right, so let's get started. Um, all right, so let's talk about stress. So, I think we all have a sense of like what stress feels like, um, and maybe you have a sense of what it does to you physiologically as well. There's a whole set of physiological responses that go along with stress, and the basic physiology of it is that your nervous system has two parts. Um, and there's the sympathetic nervous system, which regulates the fight or flight response, right? And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the relax and chill response, right? Um, and these two parts of your nervous system are mediated by a very important part of you, which is called the vagus nerve. So what happens then is, chronic stress results from when the sympathetic nervous system doesn't really shut off. And so you're always in this fight or flight kind of mode. Um, and, that has to do with, well, the vagus nerve has not turned on the parasympathetic nervous system. Um, and there's a whole host of different physiological responses that relate to this. It's not just one thing. So, for example, your heart rate is affected by this. Your blood pressure, your muscle tension, your your body's endocrine response. So your body releases all of these chemicals, including things like adrenaline, epinephrine and norepinephrine, dopamine, um, cortisol, and there's just a whole host of different hormones that get released when your body shifts from sympathetic to parasympathetic, or from parasympathetic to sympathetic. Right, all of these things need to happen, and the release of these different hormones from your endocrine system affects your mood, it affects your attitude, it affects your thoughts, it affects your emotions. Um, and so that's what creates this incredible linkage between these different parts of yourself, right? The physical part of yourself, the mental part of yourself having to do with your mind and your thoughts, and then the emotional part of yourself having to do with your feelings. And so these are all just totally and completely interlinked, right? And stress affects all of them, right? Because it may be a thought that triggers the stress, and then that triggers the physiological response, which then affects your thoughts, which affects your emotions, right? So it's all related, and it can develop a positive feedback loop. Um, Not positive in the sense that it's good, it's not good. It's positive in the sense that the effect is getting stronger, right? As you get into it, you need something that's going to interrupt that response, right? Um, and it's often, good to look at something that brings a lot to the table, right? Um, so sometimes people say, well, just do one thing, right? Like just think positive or something. Um, so that's affecting one part of it, right? The mental part. Um, it's just that if you're dealing with this physiological response and this emotional response, just addressing one part of it, the mental part, may not be enough. Now, for some people, it might be, um, doing one thing is better than doing nothing, right? Um, so I'm not gonna say it's wrong. It's just that you have a better chance of being effective if you address more parts of this, or as many as you can, right? So this is where meditation comes in, right? Meditation is a very powerful way of dealing with stress. Um, so that's what people think of usually when they think of like, well, gosh, I need to meditate because I feel so stressed, right? So we have a sense of this. We know this to be true, right? That meditation is going to help us feel less stressed. So what I want to do now is give you a simple practice, and we'll try this out together, that you can do when you feel really stressed, right? And this is going to just interrupt that feeling of being stressed, all right? So that then you can kind of, you know, um, gain a better perspective, right? Sometimes you need to interrupt that physiological response before you can really even think clearly. All right, so um, here's our here's the exercise. You're going to place one hand on your heart, right? Could be either hand, and the other hand is going to be on your belly. I'm going to the screen now so you can see this a little bit better. Okay, I've got this hand right here on my belly. One hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. All right. First thing you're going to do is just take a sigh. So breathe in. You feel that? Breathe in. So just this natural response, sighing, is actually a very powerful and usually unconscious response to stress. All right. So we're just making it conscious right now. Okay. And the position of the hands is important because the hand that's on your belly, both hands actually, but especially the hands on your belly is lower. It's bringing your energy down low, right? So what happens is, our thoughts, energy starts kind of accumulating up here, right? We want to bring it down. So you put a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly like this, right? Now there's another reason to do this, which is that the hand on the belly helps you remember to breathe down deep from your diaphragm, right? So that means expanding your belly as you breathe in and contracting your belly as you breathe out. Let's just try that for a few breaths, all right? You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. Breathe in and feel your belly expand. Breathe out and feel your belly contract. So breathing down deep in your belly has the effect of triggering that parasympathetic part of your nervous system. Okay. It sends the signal through the vagus nerve. Now's the time to relax. All right, so keep practicing this. I still have one hand on my belly, one hand on my chest. This can be done anywhere. Doesn't need to be done while you're sitting in meditation. Doesn't need to be while you're alone even. Just take a few breaths. All right, so far we've been working with the physiological part of this through breathing. Sometimes this is too slow, right? This will work eventually, but sometimes you need something that goes a little bit faster, all right? So if you're feeling like that, like, okay, I'm really stressed right now. I need something that's going to shift this immediately, all right? Well, then you take a deep breath in, okay? Fill your lungs up with breath and with energy, and then you hold it, okay? You just hold it for a while, whatever feels comfortable, all right? So let's try this out. Take a deep breath and hold it. And then release it. Do you notice that? You get a sense of like, this has given me a reset, right? It's like a timeout, all right? And then you want to shift toward breathing rhythmically, okay? So again, the hand is on the heart, the other hand is on the belly. And just feel your belly rising and falling, rising and falling, okay? So you work with a rhythm that feels natural to you. Just work on shifting from breathing up in the chest, which is unfortunately where we often breathe, to breathing down in your belly. Now feel as though your stress is being washed away, like a gentle rain is falling on you. And it's just washing away that feeling of being stressed. And then you just say to yourself in your mind, say to yourself, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. See, your mind lacks the proper context. Your mind gets on track and thinks, I've got to solve all of this, even when there's not enough data to really go on, when there's too much uncertainty. Your mind is still trying to solve this puzzle because it's driven by that sense of stress. And it's not going to make you feel happy to be working on a puzzle that can't be solved, right? And so this is why when you get stressed, your thoughts just run around and they run around and they kind of wear out a track, right? Going around and around and around. The problem can't be solved mentally. If it could be, probably would have already solved it. Where human beings are pretty smart. Breathe rhythmically. Feel your belly rising and falling. Now pay attention to the hand that's on your heart here. All right. Your heart it represents your emotional center. So as you breathe, feel your breath nourishing your emotional center. helping you to believe in yourself, helping you to know that things will turn out right. You'll be okay. That this too shall pass. All right, now you just relax your hands and let them sit on your thighs. And close your eyes. Breathe. Notice how you feel. All right, now take a deeper breath, breathing in, letting your belly expand, let your chest expand, and then breathe all the way out. And open your eyes. We'll end that meditation exercise. So, this is a simple practice to work with these three areas that stress affects, right, which are your body, your mind, and your emotions. All right, so we don't want to make too much of a distinction between these things. They're all connected. Um, your what you do physically affects your thoughts and affects your emotions. Um, if you've ever tried laughing yoga, you might have a sense of that. That's where you just start laughing, right? Ha 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 ha. Right, and you do it like really big and for a while, and you start off and it's fake, right? And then it turns out it becomes real, and you're really laughing, like just like what's funny, like you just decided to start laughing. But if you stick with it, you'll be laughing for real. Um, so that's just an example of like your physiology affecting your emotions, right? And there's lots of those because these aren't like separate parts of us, right? They're more like layers. Um, all right, so the same thing with our thoughts and our emotions, of course. We need something that is going to get to all of these layers, right? And that's what meditation can do. Meditation can touch on every part of you, and that's what makes it so powerful. Um, and that also makes it difficult because anything that touches on every part of you has the capacity to change you. Um, and of course, that's what meditation does. It changes you. Um, and that is both wonderful, like we we want to change. That's a fundamental part of being human. We want to be better, um, and it's also terrifying because we're comfortable with where we are now, let's say, even though there's a certain part of us that doesn't feel comfortable, right, that wants to change. So that's the difficulty of really sticking to meditation. So, and this is why I created courses and membership program and so on to help you with that, right? It's all available at the website, meditation2.0.com. We all need help staying on track, right? So if I can help you with that, I'm very happy. All right, well, so let's talk about a couple of techniques that you could use in your everyday life to help you with stress, all right? So you can take parts of what we did in meditation exercise and use those in your day-to-day life. All right. So, for example, you can just do the physiological part, right? You just take your hand and place it on your belly, right? Here's my, I've got my hand on my belly and I'm breathing. Right. You can see my hand moving as I breathe. Okay. you, so by the way, when I say your belly is rising and falling as you breathe, that means it should move, right? Um, so you know when you're breathing down in your belly, when your belly is moving. Um, so you know, and the movement of your hand being on your belly and tracking that movement reminds you to keep on breathing, to breathe rhythmically, to breathe deeply. Okay, because what happens when we feel stressed, and this is one of the things that makes the kind of physiological reaction go haywire, is that our breath gets disordered. Okay, and this is a very hard thing to notice because breath is usually unconscious. But you know, when you get stressed, your breath starts getting rapid, shallow, arrhythmic, like right, like your breath is like that when you have intense emotions. You know, like if you're sobbing, your breath is sounds like what I just did, right? Like, that's a very arrhythmic breath. When you're laughing, also kind of a kind of an arrhythmic breath, but you know that one's okay because that feels good, right? Um, so this is what happens. You get stressed, our breath gets disordered. When you start holding the breath, you know, maybe you stop breathing, you know, you breathe jaggedly, right? And this just makes everything worse because that kind of breathing really triggers your sympathetic nervous system, right? It's regular rhythmic breathing triggers the relaxation response. That's your parasympathetic nervous system. Shallow arrhythmic breathing triggers your sympathetic response, your fight or flight response. So that's one tool you can use. You're in your everyday life. You know, something that gives you that feeling of stress. Just place your hand on your belly and just take some deep breaths. Right. So it's just part of the technique that you learned earlier in the class. Just one part of it. When you're working with your everyday life, you need to really try and keep it simple, right? Because that's what you're going to remember to do. Is something simple. Okay. So try that one out and see how that works. Okay. All right. So the second technique I have for you is a mental technique, right? So, like I said, this is limited because it might not be enough, but for some people, it works great. And the advantage of a mental technique is all you have to do is think of it. You don't have to do anything else, right? So the mental part of this is just to take that thought that I gave you earlier, right? This too shall pass, right? So you just think that to yourself, and you think it over and over and over again, all right? Now, one of the difficulties with any kind of mental technique like this, an affirmation or a mantra, whatever it um, is that you stop doing it, right? You you think of something else, and then you start thinking about that thought, and you forget that you were doing something because that's how thoughts are, right? One thought leads to another, or we have trouble, let's say, keeping our minds on track, right? That's difficult. So one of the ways that the meditation helps with that is connecting the thought to the breath. All right. So you do that. You feel stressed, and you say, like, okay, I'm going to practice this mental technique. Okay. So you connect the thought, this too shall pass, to your breath. Okay. So you breathe in and think, this too shall pass. Right. As you breathe in, then you breathe out, and you think the same thing. Breathe out, this too shall pass, right? Breathe in, breathe out, think that thought. So you do that a few times. You can even do it while you're doing something else, right? Um, we often have these tasks in our day where we're doing something, and we could be doing something like this, especially that just involves thinking a thought and breathing, right? Because odds are you're probably already thinking some thought, and you're definitely also breathing. So, this is one of those ones you could do anywhere. All right, number 3, to place your hand on your heart and breathe. Okay. So now we're focusing on just the emotional component of stress, right? And recognizing that by placing your hand on your heart, you're strengthening your emotional center, right? And by strengthening your emotional center, you give yourself a tremendous resource in dealing with stress. Okay. Because if your emotions aren't touched by stress, then you're not stressed, right? You're not, and it will pass very quickly. Because maybe you have a physiological response. You're like, oh my God, wow, what's going on? Like, I've got to take care of this, right? Maybe you have a mental response where your thoughts start kind of going kind of rapidly, right? And but if it doesn't touch you emotionally, then it's just going to blow over. You're just going to go back to your equilibrium, which is great, right? And that's what happens when your heart is strong. Stress can't really touch you, right? Deep inside that you're okay, right? You know that you're okay. You know that you're safe. You know that you're loved. And you know that you'll be successful. Keep on trying. So you place your hand on your heart and you breathe. Let's do that for a few breaths, all right? All right. So this works mostly on the physical and the emotional part of stress. Right? Okay, so that's our. Now, one other thing I want to just mention, I wrote a little note about this, um, is that all of this stuff is going to work better if you practice it more. And what really turbocharges all of it is if you have a regular practice of meditation, right? I mean, that's pretty much the key to any kind of anything, right? I mean, is practicing it regularly, practicing it every day, right? Meditation is no different from that. Meditation is a lot like music, right? You need to have regular exposure. You need to practice if you want to be a musician, if you want to, learn that art form. All right, so try these things out. Try them out every day. All right, let's talk about anxiety. So, the reason I'm doing this together, you could talk about either one of these separately, but they're so linked together, right? Stress and anxiety. Um, an experience of stress is inevitably going to involve some anxiety, right? And an experience of anxiety is going to be stressful. And yet they're different because anxiety has one overriding emotion, right? Which of course is fear, right? I mean, anxiety is just another word for fear. And it conveys something more like it's um, a kind of a fear that can last for a long time, as opposed to the kind that's very short, like, oh my God, I almost fell off this cliff. Like, okay, I'm afraid, but as soon as I move away from the cliff, I feel better, right? That's like fear, right? Anxiety is like, oh my God, I'm just worried all the time, scared all the time, right? But then there are times where it can become very acute, right? Acute anxiety, where you get an anxiety attack or even a panic attack, right? And this comes from that positive feedback loop that I talked about before, where you have much the same thing happening, right, physiologically, which is that your body releases all of these chemicals and hormones. It causes elevated heart rate, a rise in your blood pressure, a rise in muscle tension, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these well-known physical effects that happen, and they very, very similar. The anxiety response very similar to the stress response. It's basically the same response, right? So all of this stuff happens, and of course, then it has an effect on your thoughts, it has an effect on your emotions, it has an effect on your mood. It makes it worse, right? And your long-term thinking is totally disrupted, and you're just like right here, right, with the fear. All right, so when that happens, you need to just disrupt that so you can get some perspective, right? There's no sense in asking you to think about philosophical things or whatever, right? You can barely think at all. So that in the case of that kind of acute anxiety, that kind of anxiety attack, what you should do is very, very simple. You just take a breath and hold it. Okay, just take a breath and hold it, because again, what is almost certainly happening here is that your breath has gotten interrupted. Your breath has become rapid or arrhythmic or just disordered. It's become chaotic. If your breath were regular and rhythmic, you probably wouldn't be having an anxiety attack. I mean, it's just that simple, right? The anxiety attack has all of this physiology that goes with it, and rapid arrhythmic breathing is just like, boom, it's hand in glove with that response, okay? So by holding your breath, you interrupt that. Now you also do some chemical things in your body, which is important. So I just released this video about this called Big Breath, Big Life. It's all about hypocapnia and hypoxia. So you should watch that video to get a little more detail. But basically, in a nutshell, what's happening when your breath becomes rapid and arrhythmic, a condition called hypoxia results. Well, the first thing that happens is called hypocapnia. And what that is your body's CO2 level, the blood in your blood, actually becomes too low. And that's important because your cells actually need a certain level of CO2 to effectively take in and metabolize oxygen. So it's a thing that not many people know. We just think about CO2 as being carbon dioxide, as being like a waste product. We have to get rid of it. Well, yeah, that's true. We need to exchange oxygen and CO2, but we need a certain level of CO2 in our blood. It affects the pH of our blood, and it affects the ability of the cells to metabolize oxygen. So if the CO2 level is wrong, and usually what happens is it becomes too low, then we get a situation where the tissues are starved of oxygen, and that's called hypoxia. So your brain, and you can see this very clearly on a scan, your brain becomes starved of oxygen. Your tissues are starved of oxygen. And this is very, very bad for your thinking, right? So you want to disrupt this. And one of the quickest ways of disrupting hypocapnia is just to hold your breath, right? You hold your breath and carbon dioxide accumulates in your blood. In fact, that carbon dioxide accumulation is what sends the signal to your body to breathe, right? That's what makes you feel like, oh, I need to take a breath, right? It's carbon dioxide accumulating. Isn't that interesting? It's not oxygen. You don't have the sense of oxygen depletion. You have the sense of carbon dioxide accumulation. All right, so, but when your breath has become rapid and shallow and arrhythmic, you need that. You need more carbon dioxide, right? So you just hold your breath. Now, this also has an effect on you emotionally. It has an effect on your thoughts. It just sort of breaks them, right? Your thoughts are going like, right? You hold your breath, you just break that. So you have room to think. And that's really important when you have an anxiety attack. And like what makes an attack, it doesn't matter, right? try this out. It's a very easy and safe thing to do. Um, just take a deep breath in and hold it. Okay, that's the only thing you have to remember. It's really simple. Um, so, but don't breathe out and then hold it. Okay, that's not good. That's not going to be good for you. And you're not going to be able to really hold your breath for very long either, right? So you don't need to hold your breath for like minutes, by the way, right? You just need to hold it for a little while. You don't hold it so much that it's making you feel stressed, obviously. Just hold it and then get that feeling of space. Then release it and start to breathe rhythmically, okay? So, excuse me, placing your hand down on your belly is would be a good thing to do at this point, right? Because you want to remind yourself, okay, let's breathe down deep in the belly, all right? Okay, so that's my technique for stopping cases of acute anxiety. Right? So, of course, what you also want to do is to reduce your anxiety over time, right? You want to do something which will, um, make you less prone to anxiety attacks in the first place, right? And so the main thing you need to do there is to strengthen your breath, right? Now, here's what I mean by that. I'm going to tell you exactly, okay? You need to breathe in a way that is deep. So you're using your diaphragm, right, your belly. It's also called abdominal breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. You need to breathe in a way that is rhythmic so that your in-breath and your out-breath are of the same length and intensity. Okay? It's rhythmic breathing. Rhythmic breathing stimulates the vagus nerve. It stimulates the parasympathetic response. Okay? When your breath, and when I say strengthen your breath, look, when your breath is weak, it's very easy for it to get disrupted. It's very easy for a compelling thought, to make you stop breathing. Right? And research has shown that's what happens. Like people, like they look at their phone and see something on there and stop breathing. Isn't that amazing? It's not even that something on your phone has upset you. It's just that you've become like, it's that easy for your breath to get disrupted. You just like, you notice something else and you're like, okay, you're concentrating on something and you stop breathing. And that leads to hypoxia, and it leads to, it leads to the stress response, right? So, all right, so you want to strengthen your breath, make it more regular, deeper. You also want to make your breath fuller so that you're using more of your breathing capacity. And you would like to make your breath, and this is where this becomes a little more spiritual, you would like to make your breath heart-centered, okay? So that means that every breath is nourishing and revitalizing your emotional center, bringing you into the core of your being, which is your heart. That's the home of your soul and your spirit, who you really are, right? That's what it means to strengthen your breath. Now, there's no better way to do that than by practicing, meditation of the type that really works on making your breath strong and deep and rhythmic, right? So this is the kind of meditation that I teach in the Meditation Basics course. The course spends a tremendous amount of time just taking apart the breathing and making it very simple so that you can progress with it each time, each day. Okay, so those are that's my meditation for anxiety coverage. And so I want to leave time for questions. So those of you who are with me today live, you can type a question into the chat bar if you have one. I'll answer it. So while I'm giving you a moment to do that, I'll answer a question that came to me by email, which is, there's a person in my life who makes me feel stressed. What should I do? This is from Ellie. Well, you have to look at why do they make you feel stressed, Ellie. Is it because they ask you to do things that you don't really want to do, um, and you have the sense that you can't say no? This is common for many people. So it's better to say no than it is to say yes and feel bad about it, right? So say no if the answer is no. Now, of course, it may be that a person makes, they're trying to do something like this, trying to manipulate you or whatever, in which case the best remedy is to say no. Sometimes a person makes you feel stressed because they remind you of your aspirations. They make you want to be better, and then they tear away the compromises and the illusions that that we have, and that's uncomfortable. So if that's the case, then you shouldn't say no. You should say yes. What is it that I really want? What is this person reminding me of that I want for myself, or that I would like to be? Well, sometimes we just, it's like we don't like somebody, or they make us uncomfortable or whatever, because they're reminding us not of something bad about ourselves. They're reminding us of something great about ourselves, but we're afraid of that, right? Because that's one of the fundamental fears. It's like the fear of death and the fear of really truly living, right? Those are fundamental fears. And what does that mean, to really truly live? Well, it's like to really be yourself, to really express your full potential. That's terrifying. If you're honest with yourself, that is just terrifying. So see if any of this resonates, right? I mean, is that the reason why the person is making you feel stressed, or maybe it's something simpler, like that's a person from work or something, right? They remind you of a stressful job. So what to do about all this? Well, since you can't do something about another person, really, right? What you have control over is yourself. So the techniques that I taught you in the class are great for giving yourself that feeling of like, okay, I can understand what's happening within me, and I can deal with it, right? So creating a regular meditation practice would be really good for exploring this issue. Okay, I have another question here, which is from Sean. I get test anxiety before exams. Can meditation help? Yes, yeah, it can. All right. So test anxiety, it's a particular kind of anxiety, right? And it's got a real clear reason for being, right? You're taking a test. You want to do well on the test. You're afraid, like, what if I don't? We're all, those of us who have been educated in, the Western world, the industrialized world, we've been exposed to a lot of tests and exams, and a lot of those have been really high stakes, and so that's hard, right? And on the other hand, it also gives us a great opportunity to deal with pressure, right? Because there's a lot of things in life that come down to one moment that we prepared for. So, it's gives us a chance to be able to cope with that kind of pressure, right? So, a good way to prepare for tests in particular is to put yourself in that situation in the way that you want to be, right? Now, first of all, I should say, just make sure that you study for the test, right? Make sure that you're prepared. I'm taking it as a given that you've studied, right? It's just that, and the reason I'm taking that for a given is because it's often the best students feel the most test anxiety, because they're the most in touch with the stakes, like if you're a good student, you get good grades, it means that grades matter to you, right? It means that you are trying. Um, and that's a lot of success in school or in anything, right? Is show up and try hard, right? Of course, that's not all of it, right? You also have to get it done. Um, so, if you feel like the anxiety is actually getting in the way of, uh, of performing well, um, that that's a very real risk, right? Because anxiety, it has this effect on your mental functioning. It makes your mental functioning worse in the ways in most of the ways that tests measure, like analytical reasoning and abstract thinking and stuff like that, right? Most tests are, trying to measure that, and anxiety makes it worse. So, it focuses you on, just on the present moment and, like what's happening physically and whatever, right? So you don't want that. Let's say you don't want too much of that, right? You don't want to be too relaxed during a test either. You want to be, um, you know, this, several times a day before the test happens, right? Think of yourself taking the test and feel yourself breathing, feel yourself being relaxed, and you say to yourself, "I will perform well." And you just say that to yourself, "I will perform well," and you breathe. Okay, you stay in your body, keep your breathing regular and rhythmic, and you rehearse the test so that when the test actually comes, you will have created that groove in your mind, right? So that when the test comes, that's the way you'll be, right? Because that's what you've prepared for, that's what you've rehearsed. So whenever you start getting, because a lot of times we get anxious about anxiety that may happen in the future. It's like meta anxiety, right? I'm afraid that I'll feel anxious when, right? And so with test anxiety, that often happens. Um, so whenever you have that thought, oh my God, like what if I feel really anxious during the test? You try this, right? You think to yourself, okay, here I am, I'm performing well. Right? You breathe, feel yourself breathing rhythmically, okay? And you practice that, and the test will go very well. Thanks for your question. Um, all right, now my next question here. When I feel stressed, I lose my temper more. I'm not worried about the stress, but I want to keep my temper better. Um, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Um, Sometimes it's not so much the effect of the stress on us, it's the effect on other people. You know, um, it's in some ways, sometimes we're not the best gauge of when we feel stressed either. It's like the people close to us know, right? Um, and they know when something that you're doing is good for you, like, your partner knows that you start meditating, and then you stop for a while, and your partner says, "Why don't you go back to that? That was good. That was so good for you. You're less stressed." Right? And probably what they mean is like, "I was happier around you." Um, so yes, of course, when you feel stressed, you're more likely to lose your temper. Um, Now, some people don't have that response. They don't have as much of a temper. Um, they have other issues, right? Um, so, for those of you who deal with this one, this particular one, um, well, many of the things that I've talked about will still work, right? So, when you feel your temper is just like rising and rising and rising, a great way to interrupt that is to take a deep breath and hold it. Right? That gives you space emotionally. It triggers that same kind of physiological response, which is also helpful for anger. Um, and it gives you just that, sometimes just a few moments to think can really make a huge difference, right? Like, yeah, maybe freaking out wouldn't be the best thing right now, right? Like maybe saying that would be unwise, right? Um, and sometimes that's all you need, right? And it's not like you're still mad. It's just that you haven't lost your temper, right? There's a big difference there. You can be mad, but keeping a lid on it, versus not. Um, so strengthening your breath gives you this ability, right? So a lot of times when we're upset and we're like winding ourselves up for something, either temper tantrum or whatever, a lot of times the precursor for that is your breath gets interrupted. So, right, you have this moment where you take a breath. Right. If your breath is stronger, then that breath may have the power to settle you down. Right? And that's what you'd like. Right? You'd like to be coming from your highest principles, from your best version of yourself. So by learning breathing techniques, by learning meditation, by practicing those techniques, you strengthen your breath, and your breath has more power. And that'll help you with anger as well as stress. All right, so just about out of time for today. Thank you all for joining me. And I have a new video coming out next week, so look for that. All right, thank you so much. Namaste.